start with item 1, Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2, we are looking for approval of the June 3rd, 2021 committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3, resignations. We have a little bit of lengthy list, but I'll name them as we have them. So Christiane Allison, Director of Student Services. Ryan Barrasso, Custodian. Sarah Brown, Paraeducator. Lori Dodson, Music Teacher. Megan Elliott, Elementary Teacher. Amy Hansen, Physical Education Teacher. Robert Kelly, Special Education Teacher. Dawn Larry, Skill Maintenance. Catherine Leahy, Secretary. Estella Lysa, Building Paraeducator. Gregory Willette, Paraeducator. Kimberly Rano, Technology Integrator. Miranda Shorty, Special Education Teacher. And Christian White, Assistant Principal.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We have administrative nominations. Linda Green, Assistant Principal. Michael Zachary Parker, Assistant Principal.
So moved.
Second.
Just a quick discussion, which schools are these going to?
Middle school.
Both middle school?
Yes.
Mr. Lynch, did you have something?
That was the question.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Nominations, we also have an addendum that should be on your table for 4 additional names and nominations. As the list is lengthy, I will leave it for your review, and in a moment I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion to these nominations? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We have district department head nominations. Sarah Hughes, Speech and Language. Kelly Borsch, Occupational Therapy. Carla Denston, thank you, Nursing. And Elizabeth Escadi, Nursing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item 7, summer school nominations. Haley Clark, teacher. Sally Staley, teacher. Donna Turner, teacher.
So moved.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Lynch, I'll pause for a second. I had a discussion.
Mr. Pusey, the summer school nominations, were the additional staff we needed, or is this something different?
Additional staff, we had some people that had been signed up, but then they resigned, so we needed to go back out and ask some folks.
Got it, thank you.
Since that was a point of clarity, I will redo the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Job descriptions, we have, please see attached. Now there's 3 for first reading and 2 for second reading. Just going over the first reading, we have elementary interventionist, middle school interventionist, and high school interventionist. Anything you want to make note of, Mr. Pusey, or anyone else? All right, any questions from the board? Perfect.
We have to make the approval for seconds, right?
We're gonna do that next. Some of us lost their spot in the agenda. Yeah. So we're gonna go to the second reading and approval. Stop scrolling. Yeah, I did. My thumb went. We have IT Operations Manager and IT Department Manager. Second reading and approval, just a point of clarity, that was part of the org structure, reorganization structure that we plan to come forward now.
I'll make the motion.
A motion and a second by Mr. Munn. Any discussion, questions, or anything? I'll look for, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Stipend requests, which are item 9. Jackie LaHoulier, not to exceed $3,445.40, Title I McKinney-Vento training. And Jennifer McLean, not to exceed $2,739.10, Title I McKinney-Vento training.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Lynch?
What is McKinney-Vento
So,
training?
homeless liaison trainings.
Oh,
Yep, that's the official federal act, McKinney-Vento for homeless
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 10 is our update on personnel positions.
So I just want to call everyone's attention to that it's July. We've had a lot of movement. We've had some people in and out, including myself at a conference. So we're going to be prepared on July 8th, the full board meeting, to give you an audit of where we are with open positions after we get back this full week.
Any questions regarding that? Moving on to item 11, 5-year plan. I don't think I had anything for 5 years, right, Karen?
I don't believe we did.
Not at this time, but I do have just some others that I'm going to mention, and then we could circle back to 5-year. Again, and it doesn't even have to be at this point, but it could be a conversation during 5-year this evening.
Okay. We'll just go through public comment and get to other, if that makes sense, or do you want to do those points now?
No, we can go through public comment.
All right, moving to item 12, public comment. I figured this would be a good point, since there are none, that we can now go to other. So I'll close public comment.
So I have just a couple of items. One of them was brought to my attention by Mr. Bollier, and it's just a refresher about one of our policies. Recently, not only did we create our first plan, right, that we're going to review for school opening next year, we're going to review it in July, we're going to review it again in August, but I've been reading a lot of other district plans as well. As you all know, last year, the board was chiming in on decisions that they normally do not chime in on. And we had staff, right, communicating directly with the board, and sometimes vice versa, because we were in a pandemic, right? And again, at no fault of his own, everyone was trying to help, be helpful. So what I may do when we come to evaluate our plan again is maybe bring some of the sample language that other districts have used. But this is almost like a renorming for all of us, our community, our staff, to say, if one of you were to receive an email, let's say from a staff member, but I wasn't CC'd on it, the first question would be, have you spoken to Mr. Rapucci? For your convenience, I've CC'd him on this email, right? So that way, maybe I got the same email, maybe I didn't, but now I can address it. Same thing, if a staff member were to contact, you, again, it was that something that should have been at the principal level. So I would then say, no, you need to talk to your principal, because that's just a local school issue, instead of burdening the school board. Again, the example I used when I was talking about this with Dr. McDonald was, Mr. Hebert's not going to send you emails asking next year, what's our radius, right? The day-to-day operation is why we have an athletic director, right? We may choose to use the board, again, if we were to say that the variant was becoming something that was spreading, that we may have an emergency meeting, talk about community spread, and the board may decide to change our school operations based on community data, but not the day-to-day operations at the school level. That's why we have administrators. So I thought it was a very important thing, because we did have one staff member that seemed to fail to use the chain of command, but inundated you all with emails. And I've addressed this with my administrative staff as I'm meeting with them over the course of the summer. I will also, again, review this with the RFT, right? So if there's something that they need, right, that they should be going through me because they're staff, right, and then I would then appeal to you should I need a policy change or a financial matter taken care of. So I think this is a good norming activity. It's something we'll probably always also talk about when we have Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Board Association come and talk to us about our roles and responsibilities as well. So I'll bring some sample language when we talk about our plan in July as well. But I thought it was a good topic to review.
So before I go to just want to just clarify, personally, when I was looking at some of the emails coming through, I think it was awesome that people reach out to us. But looking at this, even in my own personal career, there's points in which a board is more active during a pandemic than what we pay our staff. Obviously, we're not usually in the weeds. So I just asked, opponent colleagues, let's remind myself here, what is our normal process, so that way, when the staff member comes to us, we always ask them, we'll do chain of command first. Even though we want all the information involved later, it was just a good reminder for all of us at this time. No wrongdoing was done. So, Mr. Pappas has his hand up, and then Karen will wait too, okay?
Just a quick question, and I know I'm subject to something similar to this, but do you have any sense of how other school districts navigate the waters where people are also taxpayer in the town, so they also can have an opportunity to address their elected officials like any other member of the public.
Well, this is a New Hampshire School Board Association policy, so this, I wouldn't think changes just because if you live in the town and then you go right to the elected officials. This is the systems of operation that exists at your level, the board level, right? This is a state board policy that we ourselves have. And again, it's just to make sure that everybody that's doing what they're supposed to be doing is doing that. Because how can I solve an issue at a school if I don't know there's an issue at that school, right? I can't. And that's why, and I know many of you have done this. I was talking to Mr. Bollier when we talked about this pre-pandemic about an issue that it was an unfortunate situation. I believe it was Mr. O'Connor, at like 10 o'clock at night, sends me an email. Hey Kyle, just want to give you a heads up. I got an email about this, right? And it was like ooh, that's a biggie. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. I'll get right on that, right? And I'll contact you tomorrow and let you know how I've been able to address it. So those are like, perfect examples of how our system works. When, not that they can't email you, but you pay me to be the problem solver, right? You pay me to work with my administrators to make sure we have systems in place that everyone's getting what they need. So that's what I think it's a good reminder for all our staff as well. Thank you.
Karen?
Kind of along with what Matt's saying, I agree that there's a chain of command, and I think that we've been on the board long enough to know if somebody calls with a concern that we would say, have you gone up your chain of command? But to use the word inundated, I don't feel inundated. I actually like getting emails from people to say, we don't just get negative emails, we get positive emails as well. And I just want to make sure that, reaching out to somebody that you have voted in or reaching out to somebody that you have a trust in is, I don't want people to feel like they can't. I think that if somebody calls us, I think we need to know that there is a chain of command. So if somebody were to call me about an issue and I would say, have you talked to the principal, have you talked to, sometimes it's just a calming voice to say, here's what your chain of command would be. So I just want to make sure that it's not, do you know what I mean? I just want to make sure
Karen,
that
to
the
your point you're
statement
bringing
that
up
we're,
is exactly what the policy says. It says, like, if staff comes, just remind them about the chain of command, like you just said you would do. And that's exactly just a reminder for all of us,
right, I just wanted to
That's it.
make sure that it just
Yeah.
wasn't,
No,
you
it's
can't reach
not
out
to-
to us,
absolutely
because
not.
that would just not be something that I would.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
It's a good point. No, it's a good point for clarity. It's just a matter of, I think it happened to everyone, not just our organization, but a lot of different organizations. Boards were very day-to-day involved, right? And we always talk about a board's oversight as policy, procedure, obviously budget, in the beginning, and then, oversight of the superintendent. The 36-mile radius or whatever it was is a good example of, probably not going to be talking about that hopefully this year.
Well, and you're right, and we did have a pandemic, and I think it speaks highly of the board that people felt good enough to be able to reach out, because a lot of it wasn't necessarily that they hadn't already reached out to Kyle, it was because they knew that they could reach out to their elected official, and I think that speaks highly of the board. We are reachable people, we are somebody that can communicate. But you're right, our role is to make sure that we're having them follow the chain of command, which is, I think, we need to make sure. But as far as like emailing our board, I don't think that's necessarily,
No, not a problem.
I didn't feel inundated.
Thank you for bringing that up.
And like I said, I'll keep reviewing this with my admin staff and the teachers as well. The second item, some of you may have received some feedback about the high school guidance realignment. It's not just high school guidance realignment, it's also high school administrative realignment, and I want to make that very clear. And I'm going to review the points that brought us to this decision, and I'm happy to answer any questions after. So there were two very important laws that changed, and laws dealt with the requirement to engage students at an earlier age around CTE, and also report how you do that. Okay, now, the report how you do that is a very important thing I want you to remember. Then we have changes to our discipline under HB 1558, and it requires us to have district expectations, school teaching plans, so how do you teach all of your students about these expectations? What are your graduated disciplinary consequences, right? And have it all documented. So when and if a parent were to go to an appeal process, which would end up at the State Board of Education, both of those things. If a parent said my student was not engaged as a 7th grader about CTE, and there was no report to confirm that he or she had that, and there was no documented evidence of graduated consequences for a student, there could be a report filed by the DOE about educator misconduct, and people could lose their licenses, all right? The Department of Education is not taking, any guff. They're making sure that people comply with the code of conduct and the code of ethics, and making it very hard because there's a lot of things we have to do that we normally haven't had to do, and I'm okay with doing them, but we need to make sure we do them because I don't want anyone's credentials to be called into question. So the response to the law was one. In order to respond to the law, we needed to segregate our duties. Because when I looked at it and I talked to my administrative staff for multiple meetings, if I had one person that had to be pulled in 4 different grade levels, now really 6 grade levels because you gotta start at the high school, you gotta get down to 7 and 8 and do some of these things. They were spread too thin already, and there was crossover. Did I go to Mr. Kamari or did I go to Mr. Munn? Who was responsible for writing that down? At the end of the day, whose credential would be called into question if something were to go wrong, right? So we thought, again, segregation of duties and an alignment so that people knew if it was a 9th grade issue, Mr. Epps has a 9th grade issue, you go see Mr. Bushway or Mrs. Callahan or that guidance group because that's the group that will take care of you. And then we'll also have transition plans from 9-10 to 11-12 internally. We're also focusing on improvement. Again, the pandemic has taken us away from many of our educational aims, which is obviously to grow and improve and help students create a better pathway for themselves. So we at the board level have talked for years about career pathways, early college, work-based learning, ELOs. In order to do these things at a higher rate than we've done in the past, I believe, and our team believes, this is a better model to do that. Because if the example I used with my team is, if in 7th grade, Mr. Munn is super excited about auto mechanics or auto body or something related to auto. And in 8th grade, when we do that career inventory, and we document we did it, and he's still interested in auto. When he gets to 9th grade and the guidance counselor says, Matt, I understand you're really excited about auto. You've got to take 9th grade serious. If you take 9th grade seriously, 10th grade becomes your possible entry into auto now. Changing the law a couple years ago, 10th graders qualify for CTE. We get early admittance, which means early completion, which means 12th grade work-based studies, ELOs, early college, all of those things we want for students, right? But it only happens through a systematic approach, which has to go all the way back to 7th grade. And I don't think anyone working as hard as they did for the number of years they did it could maybe focus that way in the system we had. The other thing that I think, and this is my last point, is this system is going to create greater equity for all of our students. So let's just take Ms. Jur, for example. Ms. Jur is our ELO coordinator. My mom really cared about my education. She would have been the mom calling Ms. Jur saying, Ms. Jur, Kyle loves plumbing. I want you to get him an ELO. I want you to be working with him. Ms. Jur would have done that. We have a lot of families that work 2 or 3 jobs that are really just working day to day, keep things afloat. Don't focus that much attention on their student, but in the system we're creating, it's going to be way more equitable because we're going to know what kids need earlier. We're hopefully going to get them to buy into their education earlier instead of being a 9th grader who flails and fails all the way through 9th grade and in 12th grade is scrapping and scraping to finish. They're going to be doing career-based things or early college or work-based learning. So again, this model is predicated on response to the laws, segregation of duties, focus on improvement for our entire school community, and creating more equitable opportunities across the board. And like I said to my staff, this is like any new system we put into place. There's going to be implementation blips. It's going to find a little situation we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to deal with it. But we're going to stick with this model for at least 2 years. And we're going to make tweaks when we find things. The guidance department has talked about the possibility of if I'm 9 and 10 this year, maybe I become 11 and 12 next year, right? Administrators have that option too. We were talking about, they're going to talk about it. They're not sure what they're going to do yet. The other thing, I received one email from a wonderful young lady, a student, and her biggest concern was, I can't have my guidance counselor write my recommendation for me. And I wrote a nice response today to say, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And just this past year, I had a student who I had as a senior 6 years ago email me and ask me for a recommendation because she was going to graduate school. I wrote her recommendation. And I can't imagine with the relationships that exist at our school that any person would say, well, Matt, I had you for 3 years, but now Mr. Bollier has you, so you have to go see him. I'm not going to write that relation. That's not the relationships our guidance counselors have. The other thing is, we've already had movement in our guidance department. If you remember, Jen York took the special education job, the guidance counselor job, about 3 months ago. She had a caseload of students. She's not going to say to them next year, I'm sorry, I can't help you, you're not special education. If Ann was my student for 3 years and Jen can write a great recommendation, she's going to do it because she has that relationship. But it's also going to afford that kid who finds a new guidance counselor and loves that person, the opportunity to have that person do it. So this system will work itself out, and I'm not worried about the college recommendation thing at all.
I spoke to another senior today and asked them about it, and they said they think they have a different guidance counselor, they've had a different guidance person every year. They haven't had the same one. So, you know, I said the same thing to the young lady that you did, that I'm sure any guidance counselor that's at our school system, or even moved on, would be glad to write a recommendation from a student they know.
I think my concern, well, I actually, 2 questions. You said that you had a team. Were the guidance counselors part of that conversation?
They were part of
that
it
team?
with the high school administrators.
Okay.
And I met with them, I met with the department head today in the high school administration.
I guess my concern is the students that have trauma. You know what I mean? They trust their guidance counselor. They, you know what I mean? To have to bring it back up and possibly relive a trauma is not necessarily the best thing. And we have a lot of trauma in our schools, so I think that to me is a concern. You're right. You can write a credential for everybody, and I think that all of our guidance counselors, all of our staff are amazing. But I mean, if you get a rapport with a student and that student talks to you about a trauma that has happened, to move a guidance counselor, that makes me concerned for those individuals. And that's the only concern that I really have. So I think maybe looking at that and seeing, can we keep certain guidance counselors? Because not only do we want to keep that professionalism in that respect, but not everybody needs to know what's going on with an individual student. If that student trusts that guidance counselor, I don't know that that would be as smart. Or it could be the other way. Somebody could get a guidance counselor that they don't feel comfortable with, and they may want to switch as well. So I think for me, it's the trauma students that I would be concerned with.
Mayor.
So just first off, in a 6-year period, they'd be looking at 6 different counselors, guidance counselors. They'd be
No, because so there's a
7th
7th grade and 8th, and then 9 and 10 is a group. So if I have you as 9, I keep you as 10. Then you would just have one transition at the high school to an 11th grade. So if Mr. Lynch was the 11th grade counselor you'd have him 11
so
and
you're,
12.
I guess,
2 buckets, a 9-10 bucket
Yeah.
and 11-12
and your
bucket.
file gets passed over.
Yep, transition
and
meetings.
Here's Paul Lynch, and the 11-12 guidance counselor may never have interacted with Paul Lynch, is going, okay, well, here's the documentation of Paul Lynch. And, you know, it's just, we've taken that personal relationship, I guess, and you know, right now we did it by alphabet through the high school at least, and I understand the changes that have to happen, and I'm not necessarily against change, I'm just worried about that lack of a personal relationship. And you know, when I think guidance counselor, I'm thinking that person that is in trust, gets the trust of the child and likes them to make sure that when they're hitting senior year, they're not, oh, you're 4 credits short because you didn't take what you had to back here, or you know, that personal relationship that yeah, they may get it because they got their file.
Well, see, I think that's just selling the system a little short for this simple reason. So we do right now a 4-year plan.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the one and only time someone sees someone until time for graduation or college recs and what have you, right? So our system is going to create not only is it a 9th grade 4-year plan, right? But when there are transition meetings and I become an 11th grade student, now I'm going to have another 4-year review plan, right? To make sure I'm at a place. Mr. Roy and I, for a number of years, and this is what helped me get to the point where we're talking to the team, that every year they would do a high school career fair. And Mr. Roy would say, do you remember when you were principal and you did a high school career fair? I said, yeah, it's really cool to see where kids are going. He goes, what about the ones that are at the fair and they still don't, 2 weeks before school lets out, still don't know what they're gonna do, right? And I said, yeah, that would trouble me. I said, doing something like this means we make sure more people are involved so that there are more opportunities and less kids saying, I don't know what I'm doing, because there's more of a concentrated effort earlier and a systematic approach to make sure it happens. Because if you think about early, I'm a kid that wants to take AP classes. Okay, this is what you need to do in 9, 10, so 11, 12, you're doing this, or you're doing college credits. So the pathways we've talked about for so many years, even as far back as Mr. Hopkins, is we're gonna fill the pathways. We had ideas of pathways. We had very few students really entering those pathways. Now we're gonna create the pathways, and we're gonna be pumping kids through the pathways based on earlier interventions.
I just, when we start shuffling, if you will, and it may be a negative way to look at it, but we're not sticking, you're with this guidance counselor for 4 years, and you're even beyond writing the recommendations and whatnot, that day-to-day, I'm having troubles, or is this the right class, and whether it be the Running Start programs and things like that. Should I be in English, or should I be in, the honors programs, or things like that. I would be a proponent of the first week of school, every guidance counselor, that's assigned whatever, first month of school, I guess, would be at least touch base person, face-to-face with every student they're assigned. And in the last month of school, to make sure that, as a junior, before you start your senior year, you know where you're going. And if we leave that up to the kids,
No, it's not gonna be up to the kids, because this systematic approach.
because you said it perfectly. As a parent that's involved,
Yeah.
they're reaching out. If the parent's not involved,
Yep.
the kid's gonna fall through the crack.
Right, but in this model, the transition planning that's gonna happen, because again, the 9, 10 are gonna have these mandatory handoff meetings and different things, so again, remember in 9, 10, I'm still with that same person. So when I transition from 11, it's one guidance counselor talking to another. If they don't choose to waterfall, they could choose, again, this is guidance department choice, they could choose to be 9, 10 for 2 years and then become 11, 12. That is a school level decision right now. But you have to think about all of the things we ask professionals to do, and they do form relationships. But we also do know that some people don't get along with some people. So a break is a good thing.
And I get this, change is hard all the way around, and I'm probably the worst one when it comes to changing, If I get driving the left side of the road, I'm screwed. What my fear is not so much the parent, the child or the parents that are involved, because those parents are the ones that are reaching out, just like exactly what you said, hey, they're making contacts. It's the ones that the parents aren't necessarily involved, and the kids, I don't want to say aren't knowledgeable enough or aware enough, or, it's too late for them to be, caught, if you will. Because as a junior, I took an easy class of 1, 2, and 3. Now 4, I'm not going to graduate because I missed something, or, and that's a pretty basic example, or simple example, but I just want to make sure that we don't slide.
Yeah, so.
Uh,
You got everything you want to.
Thank you so much.
I understand your concern. I think Ms. Stokes brought up the most valuable piece of information to consider, where it's trauma. And with all the safety measures we have nowadays, where if your kid misses something, you get a honey flow, or the administration and the counselors are specifically more in tune with it now with the access to technology. So I think it's an interesting program. I'd like to see what guidance decides to do. I understand why the shift is there. I'm intrigued to see if they do the waterfall thing. I think we did that at, did we do looping?
You've done it with like kindergarten.
Well, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Right, I think we did it like School Street, no, not School Street. Blue Mountain,
Right,
right.
now, 1 and 2.
Right, and some people loved it, some people hated it, and I think it's interesting. I'd like to see how this shakes out, but I think it's definitely something that culturally we have to, give a try. The good news is, I think what really resonated with me is how we're trying it, because here's why we have to try it. We're going to try it, if it doesn't work out, we'll reinvent the wheel. But At least we're being cognitive.
And I understand those reasons.
Yeah.
And I just, again, why it's unsettling to me
Right.
is
I think Karen's point was the
it's
most
handing
important.
off, you know, in simple, basic, or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
it's handing off a file.
Right, yeah, and I think it's confident that we'd say that they're not risking it at all.
No.
Well, and I know that,
Yeah.
I know what you're
mean,
saying.
disrespect that, or, you know. we
I think there'll be more guidance meetings in this system.
I
And
hope so.
that's what this system's predicated on, is that, you know, it won't be a handoff, it'll be, hey, let me introduce you to Mr. Lynch. He's gonna be, so we've talked about doing ELOs. Oh, we gotta bring in Ms. Jura too, because, yeah, I'm your guidance counselor, she's the ELO coordinator. You know, even talking to Ms. Halligan Foley, you know, again, she's the director of guidance right now, but she would be integral, right, in helping the guidance counselors get to the middle school to connect with those kids. So now they're getting earlier connections with the high school, which hopefully will promote earlier success.
And I'm totally on board with that, and trust me, when it comes to the CPE stuff, it saves kids. Like, it really does, and I've seen it firsthand, it saves, you know, that kid that would otherwise either be a dropout or whatnot, the CPE changes and stuff.
Specs.
Three questions, and I also want to give an anecdote of sorts. But I think one thing that's very important, I think every one of us knows somebody at the high school and have heard from people at the high school. And what I think is very important is for you to get down there and talk with the guidance counselors, because leaving it to the building administration, they're going to fester and talk, and just their uneasiness, and I'll explain why, is just going to fester and grow, and it's not going to end well, I don't think. But I think if you can get down there, allay their concerns, I think that would be crucial to making this a success.
And I'll just answer after each one. Mrs. McDermott actually scheduled a meeting as the department head. We had Ms. Halligan Foley, Mr. Roy, and Mrs. Callahan this morning with Dr. McDonald and myself. We had like a nice hour meeting, talk about all the concerns, go over all the issues. So, I mean, I'm happy to meet with anyone that wants to meet, but I think as a department head, that's a good first step.
First step, and hopefully that'll also lead to you meeting with all 6 guidance counselors together, so that they can talk about it, ask you questions, and just get out all their concerns, questions, so you can hear them. I want to point out something, and I would never have known this until I experienced it, and it was my daughter won a scholarship from the Grange. And we're very appreciative of that, and I got to escort my daughter to a Grange meeting for the first time in my life. Something I knew existed but didn't really know much about. And is my daughter and another young lady who won a scholarship, and they read a guidance counselor letter about my daughter. And after the meeting, my daughter and I were talking about that, and she's like, that guidance counselor did not know me at all, judging from that letter. And she was in the unfortunate part of the alphabet that she had a different guidance counselor every single year of high school. So she had no continuity at all. And that guidance counselor her senior year was responsible for writing her a letter of recommendation for college, as well as scholarships. And she didn't know. And I fear, it's just one of my fears, and I know that as a teacher, you know, change is glacial in education sometimes. And that's one of my fears, is that a change like this is, you're going to get, it's inevitable that there will be juniors, seniors who have a guidance counselor just doesn't know their students. Whether it's just knowing them for 2 years, not really knowing what happened before what happens or whatever. That's just one of my fears with this plan. Not to say that you know, I don't support you, but I just want you to be cognizant of that. And that my daughter's a good student, she's going to college and so on and so forth, but yet that guidance counselor who should know her, and she was in all these different groups and active in her class, the guidance counselor had no idea who she was, and it was evident from listening to that letter and whatnot. And I guess one other question is, how do we determine if this is a successful shift?
Well, I think one of the things is the focus on improvement. I mean, we have data right now, Ms. Halligan Foley presented the other day. We have college acceptance rates, we have SAT performance. I mean, all of those things are metrics that we're going to follow to see whether this works. And again, you know, when you think about just kids that get into CTE and then leave, well, will it help if they get in earlier, find their passion, and they're able to actually do things? Will that help their overall grades? As Mr. Kamira mentioned, having been a principal, I knew I had to get some kids just to the year when they could only take it in 11th grade. I'm like, listen, buddy, you gotta hang on. I need you to come to school. So you don't come to school, that's the first box that they fill out. You don't come to school, you're not going to the CTE program. And I know you want to be a welder. So you've got to, you know, and so you're dragging kids. If we can get them in earlier and they find their passion, right? And the same thing with the kids that can do early college and all of those things. You know, and speaking, you know, I get how you feel about someone that writes a letter about you and you feel like you don't know them. At least on the scholarship side of things, I sit on that committee, and it's not just guidance counselors talking about kids, it's teachers that are on the committee. And those are the reasons why kids get scholarships, because of what teachers say, not just guidance counselors, because as someone else mentioned, we have had guidance counselors resign, go to a different school, and then Ann gets me, and then I leave, and then they get Matt, and it's just unfortunate. But in this system.
But my chemistry teacher wrote the best letter I
Right.
ever got.
Right. And our hope is that, again, when we specialize and we create more relationships, more people will know kids and will have better outcomes. That's one of the hopes.
Anything else, Mr. Price? Thank you. Karen, you had
Yeah, it kind of got answered. I guess my only other concern would be when Mr. Kamiri brought up the folders, making sure the guidance counselors have time to read those folders, because they have a lot of students on their list. And I would hate for a student to go to a guidance counselor and not have given them time. So making sure, I mean, I know we added extra time to, was it speech pathologist with the funding?
It was actually built after the guidance counselors already have 10 days extra.
I would just make sure that, I mean, that's a lot, and again, I don't think that they're gonna retain it all in the first however many days, but making sure that we're giving them those times to read them. So when Matt's, you know, daughter needs a recommendation, or there's a student that doesn't have a parent that's advocating for them, that they're able to take that time to look and read those folders, because I think those are really important. I think face-to-face is important, but I also think reading those folders are important, so. That was it.
Thank you. Brian, you had
The only concern I had was, I guess it's like almost a pigeonholing. Like myself, I went to high school, I thought it was very engineering based. I was going to electrical engineering, focused on high school, like calculus and math classes and physics and all the AP classes. I got to about junior year and I wasn't liking that side at all anymore. So I ended up going down a medical route. Is there a way of like, they get to a certain point, they've been focusing automotive for 2-3 years, and all of a sudden, you know, I don't like automotive, I want to be something else.
Well, if people remember reading in Foster's the Fridays with Frisbees that was started about 6 years ago, one of the most awesome stories that came out of that was a girl that wanted to be an X-ray tech, right? Loved it, wanted to do it. We don't have X-ray tech, but they figured out a way for her to do it over there. She went for 4 Fridays in a row and was quoted in the article, "I'm so happy that I did Frisbees with Fridays, because now I know I don't want to be an X-ray tech. I hate it," right?
Yeah.
So in your example, this is what we also know. I'm the kid that thinks I want to be an auto guy. I go do it in 10th grade, I go, crap, this stinks. I can go to HVAC in 11th grade, and I can complete in 12th grade, and now I can get a job because I'm certified, right? So it's going to give a little more choice and voice to the student to go, oh, I tried that, I didn't like it, right? And now I have other options, versus the pigeonholing. You're only in 11, and you have to finish by 12, otherwise you're cooked, and you didn't get your certification. So, yeah.
I can't imagine, if I could, I can't imagine guidance counselors not wanting to stay with their group. You know, if, I just can't imagine them wanting to hand off the 10th graders to the 11th and 12th and grab a new group. I just think, I would want to stay
Well,
with that.
it's how they're presented to change. If it's presented as you could wheel or waterfall.
Yeah.
Waterfall,
Yeah.
and that is, you know,
I would
that
think
sounds like
they
a
would
great
have-
option in both my kids, when they were William Allen, 1st and 2nd grade.
Yes.
You know, they had the opportunity to have the same teacher, which was a great, especially in the early years, that getting into school and the learning habits, you know, that learning the teacher part, if you will, 2nd grade is that much easier. They already had a relationship. They, the teacher knew my kid's bad habits or good habits or whatever, and my kids knew what to expect from the teacher. So the benefits of that
Oh, yeah.
are great, as long as they're presented that as an option, I guess, or whatever.
So I think there's been a number of points that have been brought up to you. It'd be great maybe next meeting just to get an update, after if you have future meetings with guidance, just give us an update how the model's going. Even if it's, it'll be August right before the school year, so hopefully some more planning during July is happening. And then, as the school year's going, maybe a mid-year update. That's it. Does that make sense, to everybody? Just to get some updates, how the progress is going, so. All right.
Just the last point I wanted to address is, you saw in one of the resignations that our Director of Student Services, Christian Allison, is resigning. She's leaving us regretfully. I want to thank her for her service formally. She had nothing but nice things to say. This an opportunity presented herself to work much closer to home. And she talked to me about her struggle to leave a place that she loves and she's very fond of with family. And again, we all have families, and I think the phrase I heard in one of my interviews when I came here was family first. She said tonight, she said, should I come tonight to address that? I said, no, go home, be with your family. She is working with us on the transition plan. We have it posted, but we are both realistic in understanding that this is the toughest time of the year to find an integral person such as a Director of Student Services. So we're going to hope that we get some good people that apply and that we can see if we can get in. But we also might need to get creative for a year. And that's why I'm recommending that the position be an interim position for a year. Because anyone we put in this position who might be close but maybe not ready, I want them not to feel like they couldn't go back to the position that they either are already in or that they're fearful that they're in and one and done. So they'll have that opportunity, and then we can go back out much earlier next year if we need to. So I think it's just a security measure to do that unless we get someone who is absolutely stellar that's relocated. But that's probably slim to none right now.
So when you say interim, so if someone came from the outside, it just gives an option for us or them to say, I'm out.
Yep.
And then if it's internal, there's an option maybe to say, let's get you back into it.
You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that's fair, especially given the late nature of posting.
I think the other thing, and I was alluding to when we talked about in 5 years, we were talking about positions we should reinstate, right? And so I asked, Ms. Allison, I said, okay, tell me about this place. I talked to the person that asked about your reference, and so she's going to a school district that's much smaller than us. We have about 900 IEPs, they have about 500. She'll be the Director of Student Services. She has 2 central office assistant directors of special services. She has 2 secretaries, right? And there's a building coordinator at every school. So if you go backwards, we have coordinators at the levels.
Probably.
Well, I don't believe, it's a different state, but it's I don't think they have a tax cut pressure.
They're different issues there.
Yeah. But, we had talked about positions in 5-year, some months ago before the budget. One of them wasn't an additional secretary that used to be in special education, right? So there was more like a financial secretary, and there was more like a day-to-day operations secretary. And then there was also an elementary assistant director of special education. So I would recommend that personnel, right, think about how we maybe get creative to do some of those things for whomever comes in after Ms. Allison.
Yeah, Karen.
So if we hire somebody as an intern, which I think is a good idea, just because special education, I think we need to have a good fit there. If they are a good fit, do we still have to, after that year, if we like that person, can we just offer them the position, or do we still have to interview?
No, we can nominate.
That's,
Yeah.
so somebody could potentially come in that, because I don't want to throw a Christian,
Like a
but
one-year
she
contract.
wasn't 100% credentialed, but she was able to do that while she was still working in the district. So we could potentially get somebody that's working on their credentials, and then within that year, so that way it kind of opens up a larger pool of candidates. Is that correct? Okay.
Or just we gave someone a shot and you know what?
Right, no, and I get that
By the
part, which
way,
is why I like
gives
the
them
intern,
options.
but if we like the intern, I don't wanna say, oh, we're gonna interview, like, if we
Yeah.
like that person, I just wanna make sure we have the option of just saying, hear it.
So Lynch.
I think it's imperative that we measure what we're looking for. And what I mean by that is, Ray Turner used to say all the time, you have to quantify it. So knowing how many students we have approximately, and what Christian had for assets as in her realm of responsibilities, I think we need to look at other districts to see how they're structured as well. And for no other reason than we start talking about really making a 5-year plan. 5-year, okay, every school district that's similar in size has this many kids, this is how they stack their deck. We need to understand what that looks like so we get a better long-term fiscal plan. It's not about monetary succession, it's like, we know that special ed is something we have an abundance of in this town, and that's not a negative. It says a lot that our staff do to support those kids, we do a lot internally, but I think it's imperative that if Christian's moving to new pastures, and I'm proud of everything she's done, she's been great, and, you know, I'm sure it was a very hard decision for her, because she was a loyalist, I completely appreciate her skill. But I think that we really need to look at it, because that's a large caseload. I mean, Matt's in Oyster River, Sarah's in Rye, we have people in other districts who can go, yeah, this is what our numbers look like, you know what I mean? So I just think we should understand what those structures are built around. So hold on one second.
Yep.
And I think that's what's important, that we're not allowed to know how many IEP students they have, right? Can we ask that question of other districts or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just try to
Okay,
understand.
For strategically thinking, especially in a very hard financial district, it's a nice way of saying, we have to watch every penny.
Right.
Whenever, like, I've looked at staffing in other places, when you're watching the dollar so much, instead of saying, all right, across the district, you need to add all these positions, strategically, that's something that we need to think of, and that's why we're needing to, as well as with your administrators, we just focus on one department maybe next year, where I know everyone is hurting and they want more staff, and, you know, we always hear about 0.97 custodians needed to finish the CTE, for example, but the idea is, maybe it's just, that's the department that we're, like you just did, check, we're doing guidance right now, then the next thing, maybe we have to focus, and that's where those dollars are allocated maybe next year, to know that we can sustain it, to know we're not another department, or just gone. But with that said,
I think, and Mr. Lynch, I think when you're looking at special ed, and I think we do need a lot of special ed in our department, we also had a really good case manager at the high school that left, and having a conversation with her case size went from a very high case size at the high school to a very much lower case size in the school that she went to. Not saying that's the reason that she went, but when you're looking at special education, I think we'd hire pairs if we have them, but everybody has a shortage of pairs and substitutes. But I mean, what's our case size? Like, you know, our case managers at high school, what's their case size for students versus Oyster River or another school? I don't know what that would be, but I would think that our numbers are higher. And when we're looking at restructuring, like Matt had said, that would be a good 5-year committee thing, because I think if, you know, when you're talking about what you need for special education, what do you need as the whole body? Because are we losing good case managers because they're just getting worn out? I'm not saying we are, but are we? I think it's a good question to look at. And then coming to personnel saying, we've looked at this entire department and this is what we feel we need and this is why. Because having, again, the Ray Turner, having that data is really important to have. But, I mean, you just got from Christian, you know, what she has for staff at the admin level. I think it's important to look at what we need at the school level as well. So I think maybe going department by department would be great. And I think that might be a good 5-year committee where we could dive into that and then bring it to personnel and say, this is what we think we need.
That makes sense.
I think that the other kind of elephant in the room, and it's nothing that we don't know, but it's important to state for everyone, is when I do an exit interview with said person or, you know.
Amazing.
You know, we can't compete with certain districts that their pay scales, right, in a non-tax cap community that is much more affluent, right? And it's just because there are, you know, within a 15, 20-minute radius, right, you can have as much as an $18,000 difference for the same position, right? And they spend $5 more on gas, you know, in a day or a week. So you can't fault them for that, you know, and so most of the reasons that, at least when I do the exit interview, is like, I couldn't afford not to do it in my last 3 years of retirement to up my retirement, you know, things like that, that strategically people are planning, you know, and you can't fault them for that. But I think looking at the case management load, we have those numbers, we can get those.
But in response to that, that's something that I think we should also be looking at. So when we're looking at the department, we are looking at the pay scale for, you know what I mean? Again, I don't want to throw out that person, but I mean, she gets more money with less people on her caseload. She's doing, you know what I mean? And she's been here, she was here forever. So I think it's something that we need to look at, because having our good staff that we train, that we have amazing, and then having them move on, it's a travesty. It just sucks, because she was, again, I knew her because of my son, she was amazing. So I think diving into that in 5 years and saying, this is the time to do it before our budget comes up next year, to say, this is, you know, in a perfect world, this is what we could get, but these are the issues that get us from here to here, and letting personnel then make those decisions.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
This might be a non-issue or not, but Karen, you said she wasn't certified, but she is certified. I want to make sure everyone knows she
Christian
is
Allison, when we
certified.
hired her, was not.
Right.
She was in the process
But
of
that's not
getting
what
her.
you said. I just want to make sure that people at home watching know that she is certified in.
Correct. What I
Especially-
thought I had said was, when we had hired her, she had not received her certification, and we knew that.
And that is okay.
Correct.
Because people can do that.
Yeah.
100%, which is why I
Right.
think the intern thing is great, because if we could
Right.
get another Christian Allison that's going towards her credentials,
I just
why
wanted to
would we
make
give
sure
that
that people at home knew, because people will come and comment and then say.
up?
Right, no one-
Okay, yeah,
no one
that
said
was
that.
not,
That's pretty
yeah,
good.
thank you for clarifying, that was not what I was trying to say.
Anything else on the other?
That's it, thank you.
Because Karen and I are agreeing way too much in this meeting, so we need to move. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Second.
Second, I agree with you, Matt.
Oh, aye, done.
Aye.